It is 1954. Detroit is a ruthless juggernaut of corporate excess, churning out massive iron V8s and towering tail fins. Within the big three, the rule is simple: go big or you don't exist. Independent brands are being bled dry, priced out by a fierce monopoly. To survive, you had to outsmart them. Enter a broke underdog's counterstrike. Lacking a V8, this radical machine relied on sheer audacity and a mind-bending mechanical trick: doors that slide seamlessly forward into the front wings. To understand how such an outrageous piece of engineering ever reached the public, one must look at the desperate straits of its creator, Henry J. Kaiser. Kaiser was no ordinary industrialist. He was a titan of wartime production, a man who had built massive Hoover Dam and churned out thousands of legendary Liberty ships for the Allied war effort at a blistering, impossible pace. He believed that if you threw enough steel, sweat, and American manufacturing might at a problem, you could conquer anything. But when he entered the post-war passenger car market with Kaiser Frazer, he quickly realized that fighting Hitler's U-boats was nothing compared to surviving a pricing war with General Motors. By 1953, the walls were rapidly closing in. Detroit's giants were using their astronomical capital to engage in a brutal supplier squeeze, making it almost impossible for independent brands to purchase steel or modern tooling dies at competitive rates. Kaiser's standard family sedans were rotting on dealership lots, ignored by a public obsessed with the prestige of the big three. The company was bleeding millions, and its credit lines were dangerously close to snapping. Henry Kaiser knew that a standard advertising campaign wouldn't save him. He needed a halo car, a vehicle so visually arresting and mechanically distinct that it would force the public to look at his brand again, bridging the gap to a brand new, lucrative partnership with Willys Overland. To pull off this miracle on a shoestring budget, Kaiser turned to Howard Dutch Darrin, a brilliant mercurial stylist who openly despised the conservative packaging of traditional American cars. Darrin had spent decades styling bespoke coachwork for European royalty and Hollywood elites, and he possessed a fiercely independent streak. Operating out of his private studio in Santa Monica, completely hidden from Kaiser's corporate accountants, Darrin set to work on a secret prototype. He wasn't interested in building another heavy, chrome-laden land yacht. He envisioned a low-slung, European-inspired sports car that would use cutting-edge materials and a radical doorway mechanism to humiliate Detroit's finest designers. The brilliance of what Howard Dutch Darrin built lay in a complete defiance of traditional manufacturing constraints. A broke independent company like Kaiser couldn't dream of spending millions of dollars on massive steel stamping dies just to build a low-volume sports car. So, Darrin bypassed the steel industry entirely by turning to a radical, space-age material that was just beginning to emerge from Southern California's boat-building scene: fiberglass. By using glass-reinforced plastic, Kaiser could lay up body panels by hand using inexpensive wooden molds. It was a manufacturing loophole that allowed a tiny team to sculpt a car that was lighter, lower, and more aerodynamic than anything Detroit could stamp out of sheet metal. But the real engineering masterstroke, the feature that would forever define the vehicle, was its patented pocket door mechanism. In the early 1950s, long before the invention of multi-stage door checks, American car doors were massive, heavy pieces of iron that swung wildly outward, regularly denting adjacent cars or clipping passing cyclists. Darrin's solution was pure mechanical lateral thinking. Instead of swinging out on traditional hinges, the doors of the Kaiser Darrin were mounted on a complex, hidden track system inside the cockpit structure. The mechanics of the system were beautifully simple yet incredibly difficult to package. When you operated the latch, the entire door panel moved slightly inward to clear the frame, and then slid straight forward, rolling along a three-point guide track directly into a hollow cavity built into the front wing. The car didn't need wide parking spaces, and it didn't matter how close someone parked next to you. The driver could always slide the door out of sight and slip into the bucket seats. It was an elegant, whisper-quiet mechanical dance that made the conventional doors of the period look entirely prehistoric. Yet, as the needle drops on the record and the gorgeous, sweeping lines of the fiberglass body fade into focus, the illusion of a world-class grand tourer begins to splinter. Start the car, and you aren't greeted by the crisp, high-revving bark of a European overhead cam motor, nor the deep, reassuring rumble of an American V8. Instead, the exhaust note is an uninspired agricultural chug, the unmistakable soundtrack of a humble utility vehicle. Underneath that exotic, low-slung bonnet lay the cold, hard reality of a company running entirely out of money. Kaiser simply didn't have the capital to develop a bespoke, high-performance power plant for their new flagship. They couldn't even afford to buy a modern V8 from a competitor. So they made do with what they had on the shelf following their recent merger with Willys Overland. They bolted in the Willys Hurricane engine, a 161 cubic inch, or 2.6-liter, inline-six. This was an incredibly conservative cast-iron F-head design, featuring an unusual arrangement of overhead intake valves and side exhaust valves. It was a dependable, rugged little motor designed to haul farm equipment and military hardware up muddy hills, not to tear up the Mulsanne straight at Le Mans. The technical specifications were deeply embarrassing for a vehicle marketed as a sports car.